Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for this webinar. I hope that you're all safe and well. I'm Matthew Campelli, the Director of Sustainability at Touchline and the editor of the Sustainability Report. I'll be your moderator for this webinar. Today, we'll be talking about how we should reimagine the built environment for a low-carbon economy. The built environment is a human-made space in which people live, work, recreate on a day-to-day basis. Buildings bring us security, sanctuary, and joy. But the inconvenient truth is that they're responsible for a significant proportion of the energy-related carbon emissions. In fact, more than 1/3. 28% of those emissions come from operational carbon and 11% from embodied carbon. We'll be exploring the distinction between the two during this webinar. And this is a major problem because, as we know, human-made carbon emissions are accelerating catastrophic and irreversible climate impacts. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's landmark 2018 report, we all need to take immediate and concrete action. If we are to achieve the objectives of the Paris Agreement to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the construction industry needs to act fast. The World Green Building Council has a vision. By 2050, all new projects should have net zero carbon impact, both in terms of embodied carbon and operational carbon. The only way to achieve this is for the whole value chain to collaborate and demonstrate how full decarbonisation can be achieved by working together. In our webinar last month, we explored Dow's carbon partnership with the International Olympic Committee, and specifically how Dow is helping the IOC balance its carbon footprint through investments in material science and low carbon innovation. One of the areas in which that work is being realised is in the built environment, and that's what we're going to explore today. More specifically, we'll be focusing on how each element of the value chain, from materials providers to architects to developers, can work together to decarbonise the built environment through the prism of the work being done by Dow and some of its partners. Today, we're lucky enough to have representatives from each of these different parts of the value chain to explain how they've realised impact through collaboration. First, we have Sergei Valievsky, the Technology and Sustainability Leader for Dow Olympic and Sports Solutions. Representing the US Green Building Council is the North Asia Director, Jing Wang. Pina Chetan is the Account Manager for Dow Consumer Solutions. And on the developer side, we have Patrick Ho, the Sustainable Development Manager for Swire Properties. Welcome to you all. Today, we'll be discussing the following topics: why we need to rethink our construction and operations processes in the context of climate change, what an effective multi-stakeholder approach looks like, and how the Dow and IOC carbon partnership is reducing the carbon impact of built environment projects. Just before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent to your inbox in the next day or so. We have a really interactive Q&A section at the end, so please enter your questions in the question box throughout the webinar and we'll get through as many as we can. And we'll also be hosting a number of polls throughout the session so that you can get involved in the discussion as well. In section 1, we'll be discussing each organisation's commitment to achieving net zero and ultimately the objectives of the Paris Agreement. During each of the sections, we'll be inviting a number of speakers to contribute in order to give you a full spectrum of perspectives. But before we start, I want you to think about the first poll, which we'll go through at the end of this section. How important of a priority is climate change for you when planning a project? But without further ado, let's get into the content. Starting with Sergei, we'll explore the commitment Dow has made to reduce its own carbon footprint. Hello, Sergei. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Matthew. And in order to get us to our topic of high-performance buildings project, I would like to talk about Dow, our sustainability journey and ambitions. We are a material science leader with a cutting-edge portfolio for applications of packaging, infrastructure, and consumer care. Our goal and ambition is to become the most innovative, customer-centric, inclusive, and sustainable materials science company in the world, while remaining committed to our core values of respect for people, integrity, and protecting our planet. For nearly 30 years, our 10-year sustainability goals have created tremendous benefits for the environment. The first set of goals was launched in 1995 and focused on Dow's footprint, helping us to reduce waste, risk, and cost. The 2005 goals focused on Dow's handprint and enabling breakthrough innovations for our customers. The current blueprint goals reflect that only through collaboration can we accelerate our positive impact and address challenges that no organization can solve alone. The world is at a critical juncture, and the world needs environmental leadership. This is why we have accelerated our sustainability journey with the announcement of some new targets in June 2020. These targets are focused on 3 areas where we believe we can make a difference: climate protection, advancing a circular economy, and innovating safer materials for our world. Our target is by 2030 to reduce the net annual carbon emissions by 5 million metric tons versus the 2020 baseline, representing 15% reduction. By 2050, we intend to be carbon neutral on scopes 1, 2, and 3 in alignment with the Paris Agreement. For this, we are decarbonizing our own operations, we are investing in renewable energy, and very importantly, we create partnerships that accelerate deployment of low-carbon solutions. One of these partnerships is our carbon program with the International Olympic Committee. As a worldwide Olympic partner since 2010, Dow has a long-standing history in the world of sports, including highly successful carbon programs with Sochi and the Rio Olympic Games. In 2017, we announced a global carbon partnership with the IOC. As their official carbon partner, we are enabling IOC's carbon neutrality through a portfolio of technology projects across geographies and applications. This program develops carbon projects across the globe and is aided by Dow Science and Technology. These projects leverage our solutions and those of our customers and partners to deliver greenhouse gas reductions that balance emissions of the IOC. We also partner with the world's best experts to scope and validate our carbon portfolio and to verify the results. As of today, these projects achieved third-party verified greenhouse gas reductions amounting to 5 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. And so this current portfolio of more than 20 projects helps buildings to become less carbon intensive, promotes state-of-the-art solutions for redesign and recycling of packaging, optimizes large-scale industrial processes, and contributes to restoration of nature. We bring the materials science, innovation ingenuity, and science-based solutions needed for these projects. And the IOC provides the global platform of sport that helps raise visibility of our solutions across the value chain and around the globe. So what part does sports play in this concept? It's quite remarkable that technologies behind these projects already exist. Many of them were developed even some time ago. These solutions are economically viable. These solutions could play a powerful role in decarbonization only if they were adopted more broadly. Through our projects, we are removing these real or perceived barriers to increase adoption, and we are using sports to provide a unique activation energy for these improvements. So now that I've taken time to explain Dow's strategy and why we needed partnership with the IOC, I'd like us to concentrate on today's topic, which is high-performance building program. Accelerating adoption of resource-efficient building options is needed for the construction industry to move towards a lower carbon future. Market barriers in the building sector are complex and can be difficult to overcome, which is why the value chain is an important component in inspiring change. This project brings together leading developer and construction companies, engineers, and green building initiatives to positively impact the environment and to introduce solutions that will benefit generations to come. In the same way, as mentioned above, we wanted to use the power of sport and collaboration to highlight and reward building projects that go far beyond the baseline construction practices, where project developers and architects demonstrate vision and action to get to the path to net zero. As a key component, we developed and validated a greenhouse gas quantification methodology to conservatively measure emissions reductions resulting from more sustainable design solutions throughout building's life cycle. This methodology has been applied to a newly built IOC headquarters in Lausanne, which Pinar will talk about later on. We also reached out to a number of leading developers seeking to apply this methodology on their projects. We wanted to identify the frontrunners, help them talk about these projects using verified carbon numbers, and to celebrate their leadership using sports as a marketing platform. One of these developers, Swire Properties, is represented by Patrick today, who will talk more about their strategy and projects. Designing high-performing buildings is key. However, using these solutions efficiently is yet another side to address. This is why we partnered with USGBC and launched a carbon challenge in northern China to involve building operators and recognize best practices in lowering the operational energy use of buildings. We are extremely thankful to our partners such as Swire, USGBC, and many others for their commitment and partnership, such organizations as Arup and South Pole, who are our great partners. So for the next part, let us hear from Jing and Patrick how their organizations are setting and driving the decarbonization targets.
Thank you very much, Sergey. Jing will now talk us through the US Green Building Council's ambition to improve lives through better buildings. Jing, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Sergey. As people in average spend 90% of their time indoor, the way buildings are designed, built, and operated have a significant impact on the quality of lives of people. US Green Building Council is a creator and owner of LEED Green Building rating system. We believe green buildings are the foundation of something bigger, that is helping people live a safe and healthy life. We are transforming the built environment by promoting the use of LEED standards. So LEED is now in 178 countries and territories. It is the most widely used green building rating system globally. While US remains the largest market in terms of number of projects, China is the second largest market for LEED. Together, we have over 100,000 commercial projects worldwide. LEED was invented with a simple basis. What cannot be measured cannot be managed. What cannot be managed cannot be improved. Many people think of energy reduction when they first think about green buildings. But LEED promotes a whole building approach to human and environmental health. It measures building in 5 areas, including energy efficiency, water savings, waste reduction, transportation, and human experience. LEED has standards for building at different stages throughout its life cycle, including new construction, interior fit-out, operation and maintenance, and car and shell. And LEED is for all building types and have specific standards for each space type, such as commercial office, retail, factory, warehouse, school, hospital, data center, etc. As Matthew just mentioned about the release of IPCC's 1.5 degree report in 2018, we have only 1 decade to save our planet. Therefore, 1 month after the report was released, at our Green Build Chicago conference, we launched LEED Zero standard. Traditionally, LEED certified projects have 4 tiers to achieve: certified, silver, gold, and platinum. For years, LEED projects around the world have aspired to go an extra mile and set their sights at net zero. By aligning with a 1.5 degree objective, LEED Zero recognized the leadership of these projects and gave the green building community a new standard to strive for. LEED projects can now achieve LEED Zero certification when they demonstrate either net zero carbon emissions, energy use, water use, or waste. Cities, big in scale, have more resource and influence to make transformational change. While it might not be economically viable for a single building to achieve net zero, net zero cities may make more sense in terms of economic of scale. 28 cities around the world have already signed to World Green Building Council's net zero commitment. In 2016, we have also launched our own Lead for Cities program, taking what we learned in buildings in the past 2 decades to influence cities and communities and to raise quality of life for all citizens. Around the world, we now have more than 100 cities certified already. That includes Washington, D.C., Chicago, Dubai, Savona in Italy, Sapporo in Japan, etc. Thanks to our community, LEED is now an international green language that people love to showcase, either through marketing promotion or having a logo on the property itself. Dow has LEED logo on its APAC headquarters building in Shanghai. Swire has LEED logos in many properties they owned. But do the occupants of these buildings really understand the meaning and impact behind the proud LEED logo? The heart of our community efforts must go beyond construction, efficiency, and materials. What matters most in these buildings are the occupants of these buildings, human beings. Therefore, we conducted a research called Living Standard last year to ask the wide community what they think about climate change, sustainability, and green building. It turns out we, as green building community, has a mountain to climb in terms of messaging. When people think of emission, they think about cars, power plants, manufacturing industries. They rarely think about buildings. So this slide just shows 2 questions we surveyed. On the left-hand side, environment don't even make up to the top 3 list of what people are concerning today. Even we are talking about 2030 as a timeline for many of our efforts to combat climate change. People in the wide community still lack a sense of urgency yet. However, they do consider environment as an issue when they think about the future. Furthermore, on the right-hand side, when we ask people what we can do to save the planet, you can see living in a green building is ranked very low in the response. The silver lining is, if we look back on top of the list, those items like resource conservation, energy reduction, recycle are all benefits of green buildings. That is to say, if people, as occupants of the buildings, don't understand the benefits of green buildings, they don't understand the impact of their choice when they select the place to work, live, and play. This research reinforced our vision as US Green Building Council entered its 2nd quarter century. Our goal is for LEED to be known not only as a plaque or a logo, but for people to experience them, for them to live a happy and healthy life. Only when people inside the building understand why we need to achieve net zero is no longer a concept. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Jing. Now we'll hand over to Patrick to discuss Swire Properties' net zero roadmap. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you, Matthew. My great pleasure to share from a developer's perspective on a low carbon journey. Swire Properties is a leading developer and operator of office, retail, hotel, and residential properties in Hong Kong, Chinese mainland, Singapore, and the United States. We are listed on the main board of the Stock Exchange of Hong Kong. Through the process of creative transformation, Swire Properties aim to create long-term value by transforming places into vibrant and sustainable communities to improve their well-being and to bring positive impact to the environment. Green building development is actually a cornerstone of building these sustainable communities, and we have been focusing on green buildings for decades. As of now, 97% of all our existing building stock were certified green buildings, of which 84% have actually achieved the highest rating of various international green building standards, including LEED standards of USGBC as introduced by Jing. To ensure sustainability is well integrated into our business across different functions and jurisdictions, since 2016, we've announced our SD vision, which is to be the leading sustainability performer in the industry globally by 2030. This vision is supported by our Sustainable Development 2030 strategy, which is a comprehensive strategy that consists of over more than 80 KPIs under 5 strategic pillars, namely places, people, partners, performance economic, and performance environment, as shown on the chart on the right-hand side. We believe that as the investments ensure that we can mitigate risk to a business, such as climate change, regulatory and market shifts, and it also helps enhance our resilience against shocks and stresses, and more importantly, drive innovations to meet the evolving needs of the real estate markets. Our sustainability investment have borne fruit, and we continue to be recognized by a number of global sustainability index. For example, on Dow Jones Sustainability Index, we're ranked #1 in Asia, and we also topped the Hang Seng Corporate Sustainability Index with a AAA rating. Climate change is one of the most important focus areas under our SD 2030 strategy, and we are firmly committed to reduce our carbon emissions along the whole building life cycle. Using this chart drawn in reference with World Green Building Council's publication, I wish to illustrate that our carbon reduction strategy covers the various stages of a building life cycle, including construction stage, raw materials procurement, building's operational stage, as well as at the end of the life stage. At the bottom of this chart, I mapped our various initiatives we have adopted, including our science-based targets, actually to address upfront carbon, operational carbon from both landlord and our commercial tenants' emissions, as well as the end-of-life carbon from demolition waste and so on. To support all these work, we're adopting different green finance instruments such as green bonds, green loans, and sustainability linked loan to finance these initiatives. And let me come back to science-based target, SBT. To drive long-term decarbonization of our portfolios around the world, we became the first real estate developer in Hong Kong and Chinese mainland to have an approved science-based target in 2019. Science-based target are carbon reduction targets that are in line with the latest climate science, and they are ambitious enough to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. This is very important, and it provides us with a clearly defined pathway to advance to net zero and to future-proof our business in low carbon transition. Under our approved science-based target, we have set targets to reduce our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by 35% and 52% by 2025 and 2030 respectively. And we also set Scope 3 targets to reduce emissions from our downstream lease access, that is our tenants' emissions, and our upstream emissions from our new development projects. Let me go a little deeper into our work on reducing our Scope 1 and 2 emissions, which refer to direct emissions and also indirect emissions from the electricity consumption of our buildings. We have sustained remarkable energy efficiency improvement for well over 2 decades, and I'm very proud to say we have managed to decouple our business growth with our energy consumption. That means our buildings' gross floor area increase over the years, but our total energy consumption decreases. Our efforts help the firm to achieve a 75 million Hong Kong dollar per year bottom line savings. And today we still continue to achieve energy reduction through adopting a comprehensive set of strategies as shown on this slide. For example, in equipment upgrade, we continuously adopt emerging technologies such as advanced electronically commutated motor plug fans, which saves up to 30% of fan energy from HVAC system. For existing buildings, our monitoring-based retro commissioning works help ensure that a high efficiency operation of our HVAC system is maintained. And the third component is on digitization. We have established a smart energy management platform that aims to connect all of our individual building systems, and this enables us to have better energy data tracking and optimization through the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And last but not least, we continue to enhance our renewable energy generation capacity on site. We have achieved an overall 30.2% of electricity supplied by renewable sources, including both on-site and off-site renewables. Going forward, we'll continue to look for opportunities to procure more renewables, in particular for our Chinese mainland portfolios, where new market options such as power purchase agreements of renewable are emerging. Our science-based targets, Scope 3 emission targets, requires us to also work closely with our value chain partners, both upstream and downstream. Tenants are indeed our most important stakeholders downstream. And so far, from the positive feedback from tenants participating in a free energy audits program and Green Kitchen initiative, we understand these will help them save costs, and we believe that tenants are keen to engage with us more on this topic. We also work very well with our material suppliers and building contractors upstream to reduce embodied carbon of new developments. And these are done mainly through the adoption of more low carbon concrete and steel, and structural optimization in the design stage. I hope my presentations have given you some ideas on how Swire Properties plan construction operations with the climate as a priority. And let me pass the stage back to Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for your insights. Now's our first opportunity to bring the audience into our discussion today, and this goes back to the question that we asked at the very beginning of this section. How important a priority is climate change for you when planning a project? So I'll launch this poll now, and I'll give the audience about 30 seconds to answer this question. So is it is climate change the first consideration when you're planning a project? Is it a top 3 issue? Is it quite important? Is it not a pressing concern, or is it E, not even considered? So we'll give about another 5-10 seconds to answer this one. Just a few more seconds. Okay, we'll close the poll now. Okay, so the results are pretty interesting. So the majority, just over half, 54% say it's a top 3 issue, 13% say it's the first consideration, and only 2% say it's not even considered. That moves us nicely onto recap for section 1. So let's recap on what we learned. Firstly, the whole value chain must work together to achieve net zero. Secondly, carbon neutral cities could be the next evolution of carbon neutral buildings, as Jing explained. And thirdly, as Patrick explained, science-based targets are an effective roadmap towards the Paris Agreement. Let's move on to section 2 now. We may have our own house in order in terms of our objectives, but how do we build an effective multi-stakeholder approach with our partners? Before we go into this, I want you thinking about our second poll, which we'll review at the end of section 2. Should companies review the environmental policies of partners before deciding whether or not to work with them? So let's kick off this section with Pinar. And Pinar, who will discuss how to build an effective multi-stakeholder approach for sustainable buildings. Hello, Pinar.
Thank you, Matthew. So Dow is one of the largest fully integrated material science company that counts on the main pillars of what chemistry is offering to us. We can mention acrylic, cellulose, polyurethane, ethylene, propylene, and silicone. Those chemistries allow our scientists to continue developing and upgrading smarter building materials to deliver energy efficiency, comfort, and performance. On the screen, you see the mega trends that we believe will shape the future of our world and that we consider every time we are investing in a new research. As you can see, we take sustainability very seriously. So those are different market segments that Dow has significant business in the construction sector. For example, we are a player in coatings with raw materials and intermediates. With construction chemicals, we work with the most prominent brands to develop new intermediates in their formulated products, as well as provide protective technologies, for example, to concrete. Infrastructure is also an important market for Dow and will continue to require more technologies to cope with the challenge of aging. Sealants and adhesives also continues to grow in the sector as it allows lighter and higher performing products. By the way, all the nice buildings that you can see on the skyline on the slide are the projects that have been glazed with Dow silicones over the 5 decades. So most of the technologies we offer in the buildings are carbon preservative. That means the ratio between the carbon that will be saved, like for example, for a triple glass unit sealed with our silicone adhesives, versus the carbon emitted to produce the quantity of the product needed, is vastly positive. In average, it is 7, but we can go as high as 28 when we talk about insulation. This is due to 2 main factors. First, we generally use a very small quantity of our product, but they have a big effect. Take again the example of an insulating glass seal at the perimeter of a large window, for example. And second, silicones last long time. It is indeed the more lasting technology in the building environment with raw glass. We have proven the reliability of our adhesives for more than 50 years in real building applications. And over their lifetime, it is estimated that the silicone sealants for buildings reduce emissions by around 120 kg carbon dioxide equivalent per kg of sealant, which is an essential an irreplaceable contribution to the energy efficiency of modern buildings. Okay, we have those technologies, and we need partners to realize those technologies in real buildings. As for every transformational idea, it is important to map the value chain in a business, which means who would benefit for a change and who would face the biggest challenges. So whenever we want to promote a technology that would reduce the carbon footprint of a building, an effective multi-stakeholder approach is the one that will engage different stakeholders, from the fabricators to the building owners or developers, and precisely understand and address the benefit to cost ratio of a change. The challenge is always that the costs and the benefits are not synchronized and not at the same place in the value chain always. For example, say a fabricator, if asked at the late stage in the building process to adapt a premium but better technology, will not necessarily be rewarded by higher price, but at the contrary, be exposed to a higher risk. While this technology could provide a better lead or other equivalent ratings that would eventually lead to an increased renting prices that will benefit the developers or the future owner. So it's a must to work across the value chain at the right time so that the expectations, rewards, and costs are clarified from the beginning, as this would save a lot of unnecessary efforts if the business case is not right. On that aspect, the role of architects and sometimes consultants are also generally a great help. And DAO's effective project management system allows us to get in contact with the value chain at the design phase of the projects. Here's an example project where we can demonstrate that approach. The Olympic House in Lausanne is the new headquarters of the International Olympic Committee. With the adoption of state-of-the-art building technologies that are available and commercially viable to developers today, this project was named one of the most sustainable buildings in the world and has received the most points of any LEED certified new projects to date. It is also the second building to obtain the highest level of SNBS, and on top of those two, the Swiss energy efficiency standard guarantees that this building consumes 35% less energy per square meter than a reference building designed to meet already strengthened local standards in Switzerland. Let me walk you through the DAO technologies used in this iconic building. A crucial challenge was balancing the design with an energy efficient and iconic facade. Our dynamic group of design and performance experts worked in full collaboration with the stakeholders to ensure that the project's aesthetics, wellness, and sustainability goals were met. DAO silicone solutions were specified for structurally bonding and sealing elements of the double skin glass facade. This was due to their track record of longevity, proven performance, and also their ability to conserve energy, improve acoustic performance, and enhance the aesthetics, and enable a building design that increases the daylight opening and living comfort for the occupants. Olympic House also served as an exemplary project to develop and validate a greenhouse gas methodology for DAO's high-performance building initiative. It is expected to deliver a total of 3,351 tons of third-party verified greenhouse gas emission reductions over the lifetime of this building. And to improve the indoor air quality within Olympic House, the interior walls are coated with a paint formulated using a special binder. This low VOC waterborne binder was created with a patented PormaShield technology from DAO. It helps to remove formaldehyde from ambient air in the building by triggering a chemical reaction between the formaldehyde and the binder. And on the parking lot rooftop, the application of Verda-Seal waterproof membranes offers excellent environmental protection. This coating doesn't use any fumes, open flames, or solvents that are known to contribute harmful emissions. And last but not least, for added safety, the vehicle parking lot deck floors are coated with DAO TraffiDeck top coat. This is a solvent-free polyurethane-based coating, and it is designed for easy floor cleaning to minimize maintenance costs. It also builds with a good chemical resistance and provides an anti-slip surface so that it helps to make it safer for the visitors. It is fair to say that at the heart of the Olympic House project, engineering success was the efficient and high level of internal and external collaboration between many different stakeholders, including Dow. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Pina. Let's move on to Patrick now. Patrick, you'll be talking about Swire's One Taikoo Place project and how the value chain came together to make it a super sustainable building. The floor is yours, Patrick.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm going to add on Pina's great examples here using One Taikoo Place as a case study to illustrate our carbon reduction strategy along the building life cycle. Completed in 2018, One Taikoo Place in Hong Kong was designed with the highest green building and wellness standards in mind. This 1 million square feet AAA office tower is the first commercial building in Asia to achieve WELL Final Platinum, and is also the first commercial building in Hong Kong to obtain a triple Final Platinum rating in LEED, BEAM Plus, and WELL. We have adopted an integrated design and whole lifecycle approach to its project design and development. And this requires members of the project team, including architects, designers, engineers, a project development management team, leasing team, technical and sustainability team to work together from the onset to achieve the required sustainability targets we have set together, as shown on the right-hand side of this chart. For example, One Taikoo Place has been designed to achieve annual energy savings exceeding the local building energy co-performance by 33% and the LEED baseline performance by 28%. On the building level, we have innovated a number of design systems. For example, high performance facade with low thermal transfer with high light transmission, and a 70.5 meter tall podium glass to enhance natural daylight utilization. And this is one of the tallest in the world. On these, we're lucky to have worked with Dow Chemical for the facade structural sealant solution to ensure premium performance on both technical and sustainability sides. We've also worked with Arab to create Hong Kong's first AI-enabled building by adopting this smart energy management system, which provides a comprehensive picture of energy usage, occupancy, and system conditions and monitoring via an interactive and responsive dashboards. In Hong Kong, where it's well known for urban density, we made most of the limited space available, even on the rooftop of One Taikoo Place for sustainability reasons. We work closely with the university partners to implement these dual-level roof system fitted with a combined green roof and solar PV system. And this green roof helps reduce the surface temperature of the solar panels and thus increases its renewable energy generation efficiency. And this is one of the first commercial adoption in Hong Kong. One Taikoo Place is also the first commercial building in Hong Kong to use a waste-to-energy trigeneration absorption chiller system, which supports the simultaneous generation of electricity, heating, and cooling. And this is powered by biodiesel, which in fact is recycled from waste cooking oil collected from a food and beverage tenants' restaurants. In addition to renewable energy generation, the residual heat from the generator is used to provide hot water and serve absorption chillers for chilled water generation in the building. We have also worked beyond operational carbon to cover the embodied carbon of One Taikoo Place. During the construction phase, we have done a very detailed calculation of the cradle to site carbon footprint data of the building, with technical support from a cross-functional research team from a university partner, and with our building contractor, Gammon Construction, and material suppliers of a concrete, reinforcement bar, structural steel, glass, and timber formwork, and so on. And the key findings show that the embodied carbon in the building's concrete, rebar, and structural steel contributes to nearly 99% of the total embodied carbon emissions. So in the material procurement stage, we have adopted extensively certified low carbon concrete, which has adopted a certain percent of pulverized fly ash as cementitious substitutes. For reinforcement bar and structural steel, we have also adopted those recycled content and those manufactured by less carbon intensive approach. And based on these detailed results, we've also started to set performance-based target requirements for embodied carbon for concrete, rebar, and steel in other pipeline development projects. This is it, our current efforts on one of our flagship commercial buildings. And the key message here I want to say is that partnerships is a key component to drive the whole re-engineering on carbon reduction on buildings. And we look forward to having more in future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Let's move on to Jing now, who will talk more about the US Green Building Council's Carbon Challenge project. Over to you, Jing.
Thank you, Matthew. As Patrick introduced Swire's sustainability efforts, real estate industry is making real progress towards ESG. There are three drivers meaningful. First, the demographic change. By end of this decade, Millennial and Gen Z will make up the main workforce and consumer base. These two generations in general have more environmental awareness and to want to live a purposeful life compared with their previous generations. Whether developers as a brand or employer, to attract these generations, they have to communicate their ESG efforts. Secondly, real estate developers are facing more sustainability requirements from investors and regulators. Over 1,000 real estate developers and funds are participating in the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmarking, GRESB, a benchmarking subscribed by 100 top institutional investors. In order to attract investment, real estate developers need to be evaluated on their GRESB ranking. Lastly, on risk management. While buildings are the reasons for climate change, buildings at the same time are victims of the climate change as we are facing more extreme weather events. With ESG transformation in context, now over 100 organizations and cities are joining World Green Building Council's Net Zero initiative, committing to be net zero by 2050. Among them, there are engineering companies like Integral Group, investment banks like Goldman Sachs, real estate funds like Grosvenor and M&G Real Estate. But how do they turn commitment into action? To be net zero carbon requires not just a promise, but a pathway in which everyone in the organization should be a part. That's why we initiated Carbon Challenge together with Dow last year. A picture can be worth 1,000 words. This is a photo that participants of Carbon Challenge were recognized on the stage of our annual conference, Green Build China. When organizations make the net zero commitment, too often there is a gap between what and how, and a gap between top management and day-to-day operational staff. When we come up with the Carbon Challenge, we had one very simple and sincere objective in mind: to make sure the building and property management understand carbon will be the new currency in the business world and know how to calculate carbon. There is a timeline for buildings to achieve zero carbon. The goal is only achievable when people managing the building understand it. So the program invited participations from any office buildings and shopping centers that are over 20,000 square meters in the Great China area, Japan, and Korea. It evaluated merits during a one-year period based on Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. All data was calculated using the same calculations as ARC system, which is a technology platform we use in the newest version of LEED to track buildings' performance. So in the end, last year, 63 projects joined this program, which covers 7.5 million square meters in North Asia, including major developers such as Swire Properties, high-tech manufacturers like LG and TSMC, and hotel projects in Macau. One thing we are extremely proud is the diversity of the participants, which include international developers and local ones, enterprises, real estate developers, as well as investors. We believe only when every building is playing a part, we can make the net zero promise come true. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jing. And that brings us nicely to our second poll and another opportunity for our attendees to get involved. We asked you at the very beginning of this section, should companies review the environmental policies of potential partners before deciding whether or not to work with them? And we'll do this very quickly because this is just a very simple yes or no answer. So we'll launch the poll now. Should companies review the environmental policies of potential partners before deciding whether or not to work with them? Okay, just another few seconds here. But this one is looking pretty unanimous. Yes, 100% of you think yes, companies should review the environmental policies of potential partners before deciding whether or not to work with them. Thank you. So let's recap on the learnings from section 2. Project management is a key part of successful collaboration. Secondly, working in partnership can be a complex process, but it's a hugely worthwhile one. And when organizations come together to work on a vision, the results can be very impactful. Let's move on to the discussion segment of this webinar. Here we'll be taking questions from the audience. But before we do that, I want you to think about the third and final question, which we'll launch right at the very end of this session. And it's quite a fundamental question. In your opinion, is the construction industry in a good position to become net zero emissions by 2050? Okay, let's get through some questions now. And now we'll be opening this up to all of our speakers. So let's switch everyone's mic on. And we'll get everyone's camera up as well, so we can make this a little bit more interactive. Okay, hello everyone. I suppose the first question that we will ask is, what were your most valuable learnings from the partnerships that we discussed? And perhaps, Sergey, we can start with you because we haven't heard from you for a while.
Right, thank you, Matthew. So as I mentioned, we do work across different applications, and buildings is by far the most complex in terms of the value chain and in terms of the fragmentation. So there were several things that we had to learn how to do and are still learning. So how to overcome this fragmentation, how to get from very small verified benefits and multiply them. Yes, so and we are still learning how to do it. And secondly, as a material science company, as an ingredient provider for facade of high-rise buildings, how we can be more than this? How can we go beyond being a supplier and work with our partners and customers, demonstrate thought leadership, and establish these collaborations that would result in some practical and tangible environmental impacts?
What about you, Jing? You mentioned the carbon challenge just a few minutes ago. What would you say that USGBC's key learning from that project was?
I think carbon is a frequently used word, even especially for industry people like panelists at the board. But getting people, even people inside with the related industry, to really understand what is carbon and know how to calculate carbon, feel the urgency of zero carbon and know how to reduce carbon, we still have a long way to go. To bridge the gap, we must really collaborate along the value chain and connect the dots. Thank you.
And Pina, how about yourself? You mentioned the Olympic House project in Lausanne. What would you say a key learning from your position would be?
Maybe building on what Sergey said, it's really important, I think, also to continue the collaboration with your partners and carry it for the next projects. It makes it very easier to start a new project, again, considering the carbon preservation.
And finally, Patrick, how about yourself? You talked very eloquently about the One Taikoo Place project. What would you say were the key learnings from that project?
I think it's important that as a developer perspective to talk about your ambition. For example, a science-based target actually help us to open the door to a lot of new collaborations with our value chain partners upstream and downstream, and we find it a very effective process. I think that sort of process and exchange, data sharing has to be accelerated and enhance more new collaborations like today to happen in the near future.
Another question we got here is how you identify appropriate partners to work with, because you talk about a value chain, there's lots and lots of different components and stakeholders. So how do you identify the right partners to be working with? And perhaps Patrick, as a developer, we can stick with you for this one to begin with.
Yeah, I think partnership is indeed what I said is very important to bring about real changes in our case. And I think a developer is very well positioned to actually influence and accelerate that change along the building life cycle. I think to quote an example that we've worked before, we find very successful is that we have launched an initiative called Urban Lab in mainland China, which is the first property technology PropTech accelerator, corporate accelerator program. And through this is a partnership with Jones Lang and Ping An Urban Tech Company, and it was a successful experience to help being engaged with a lot of startups, actually providing our buildings as a testing ground for many new and emerging technologies on site to gain experience for these startups at the same time also bring real values to the terms of operations and the building design of a new buildings. I think these sort of partnerships and building the networking and with startups and all that is indeed a very powerful accelerator of this partnership to bring about, you know, low carbon and net zero ambitions in the near future.
Sergey, you mentioned the IOC Carbon Partnership, and obviously you work with a number of organizations in many different industries. How do you go about identifying the right partners in those projects?
Yes, right. So I've been engaged in this kind of programs for many years, for like 8 years, and this phase of looking for ideas is by far the most exciting, in my opinion. Yes, so we need to engage in hundreds of discussions to come up with a handful of projects and opportunities, and sometimes you sit across your customer or a potential partner, and you don't know what you're going to do together, but it just clicks. You understand you can do something because you see the drive, you see the commitment, and these discussions, they result in good projects and in partnerships. Yeah. So this is trying to find out where the sum is greater than the individual parts, and intuition, seeing this a potential partner in someone that you talk with.
Jing, you spoke very much about partnerships in both your elements of your presentation. How would you characterize a good partnership, and how would an organization in the built environment space look for an appropriate partner or partners to work with?
We are all in sustainability business. We make efforts on a daily basis to make sure that our planet is safe and healthy, not just for us, but for our future generations. Ultimately, we need more human beings who love the planet and want to make it sustainable. So same thing in the business partnership. We want to work with partners who share the same vision with us and strive to make a difference for the better world. Thank you.
Sticking with this topic, we've got a specific question from the audience for you, Sergey, about the DAO IOC Carbon Partnership. And they're asking, what is the potential to further bring other stakeholders into this partnership, into this existing partnership?
Right. So I think it overlaps really with the previous question. And so for this particular program, during the last 3 years, we talked with the largest possible spectrum of organizations, from banks to NGOs to construction companies to green building initiatives. And so, as I said, we are always looking for synergy, and we are always open to collaborations. So, because this is how things can be tackled in this very complex application.
Many people are asking about kind of future trends coming down the track in the built environment in terms of decarbonisation. Perhaps each one of you could pick a future trend that you see as being really impactful in this space. And Pinar, maybe we can start with you.
Let me share the mega trends that we see actually to shape the future of the construction industry. So first, as I mentioned in my first slide, the environment and sustainability is one of the obvious ones. So as you mentioned, Matthew, currently buildings are responsible for more than 1/3 of the carbon. So it seems construction industry is the one of the major ones to tackle with climate change. And another mega trend we can say is the urbanization. So it seems it will more and more increase. The people living in urban areas will increase significantly, almost 70% in 2050. And we also need to remember the environmental migrants to come as well. And third, maybe digitalization. Maybe it's more obvious that it will be more integrated into the buildings, but I believe it will be more and more used in the design phase, the construction phase, as well as considering how are we going to recycle those buildings or reuse them.
Jing, the same question for you. What trends do you see coming down the track for the built environment in terms of, you know, reducing its carbon footprint?
There are a lot of promising trends, but if I really have to just pick one, I would say all buildings in. From our newly participating projects that we've been monitoring, the concept of sustainable buildings are penetrating from tier 1 cities to lower tier cities, from traditional participants like office and retail to other space types such as warehouse, data center, factories, and from new buildings to existing buildings. Thank you.
We'll go through a couple of questions now because we're coming up to time in a few minutes. So let's go through a few ones. We've got a really interesting question from the audience about how we can bring valuable information like this to the public. How can architects in the industry in general reach out to the correct audience? Maybe we can start with you, Patrick, on that one.
Yeah, I think we at the onset, as I said, we need an integrated approach to when we plan the project. That means we bring together the architects, the material suppliers, the engineer, the structural engineers, and the sustainability team, project management together. That's why how we set out our targets in terms of when we design building, what are the end game, what are the specific energy reduction target we have to achieve, and we plan about what are the procurement process we have to adopt in the tendering stage, what sort of low carbon materials we have to build in that. I think that process actually help us to at the very beginning to have the dialogue happening and lead us through the whole project completion, and we're seeing positive results from that dialogue.
So Sergey, what's your view? How do we get this information to the right audience?
This is a super interesting question, especially for us, the material sciences company. We do know, and not many people realize that more than 95% of all materials around us are enabled by chemistry, are enabled by material science. Yes. So how can we design and use these materials and these solutions to make our lives better and more comfortable? And how can we use these solutions and technologies to reduce our carbon footprints as individuals and organizations, and how we use science to decarbonize? So we do work a lot with our partners, but also with general public to communicate these projects and to communicate how safer materials and how low carbon solutions enabled by science can lead to decarbonization.
We've got another question here, which may be directed to either you, Pina, or to you, Sergey. And this is with regards to some of the products that you mentioned throughout the webinar. And what happens to these during end of life? And where does end of life come into this with regards to decarbonization? Maybe Pina, we can start with you.
Yes. So we need to understand that it's really important to design from the beginning of a building how the end of life of each and every material in a building will end up. But it's also important to consider the lifetime of those materials as well. So it's also important how much they will contribute and how much it will be used compared to their lifetime. So it has both aspects, I think.
And we've got a couple of questions, one specifically for Jing, one specifically for Patrick before we round this up. And for Jing, the question is, can there be discrepancies between design and actual energy performance? And how can green building standards address this?
Yes, for sure. Demonstrating leadership at a single point in time is just not enough. Occupants will change, technologies will evolve, and market expectations grow. We want all LEED projects to continue to demonstrate leadership long after they are constructed and occupied. That is why in the newest version of LEED, we use the technology platform that I mentioned earlier that called ARC to encourage buildings to track operational performance to see whether they are falling behind, keeping pace, or leading the pack.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jing. And final question for you, Patrick, and this refers to science-based targets, which you touched on right at the very start of the conversation. And what is the best approach to science-based targets, and how can a company put itself into a position to adopt them?
Yeah, I think every company should well consider that possibility, because it's not something that is a burden to you, but in fact, it helps you to redefine your pathway to actually future-proof your growth. And I think every company should start to actually have a comprehensive carbon inventory built up for your Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. And I think Science-Based Target Initiative actually provides a very powerful Excel spreadsheet and a lot of resources online to actually help calculate that job easy and quick. And also on Scope 3, I think this is an area a lot of companies would feel more difficult. I think on these, I think you don't have to do a very detailed calculation, but in terms of Scope 3, you have to only do a basic screening to understand along the value chain what are the hotspots. Like us is our tenants' emissions and also the embodied carbon from new development. So once you do the screening process, you identify hotspots, then you start to do the mitigation measures to address the Scope 3. I think in terms of setting science-based target, that's sufficient in terms of addressing the ambition that science-based target needed for your Scope 3 emissions.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And thank you to the audience for all your wonderful questions. Sorry we didn't have time to get through them all, but we'll pass on the specific ones to the specific speakers after this presentation. To finish off, let's move on to our final poll. And this one may have been shaped a little bit by the conversation. In your opinion, is the construction industry in a good position to become net zero emissions by 2050? And we're on this last poll again. It's a very simple yes or no answer. And we'll give you a few seconds to answer this one. Just about 5 more seconds now, and it's looking quite mixed. Okay, and we're going to close the poll now. Okay, so 40% of our attendees think that the construction industry is in a good position to become net zero emissions by 2050. 60% think no, so it looks like there's still a little bit of work to be done. Finally, before we finish off, let's talk about our key takeaways now. To reimagine the built environment for a low carbon economy, we have to put net zero as the ultimate objective within our organizations. We have to collaborate on achieving these targets. It may be complex, but it's a hugely worthwhile process. We have to prioritize a solid project management system, and we have to think about embodied carbon in relation to operational carbon. Thank you to our audience for spending time with us today and contributing to the polls and the question and answer. We really appreciate your time. Thank you to our panelists, Sergei Belyevsky, Jing Wang, Pina Chetin, and Patrick Ho, who were very generous with their time and provided lots of insight and lots of value. A recording of this webinar will be sent to your email within the next day or so. Please feel free to rewatch or to share this with any colleagues who may find the content interesting or useful. And don't forget to mark the 17th of September in your diaries. That's the date for our next webinar, which will focus on unlocking value and carbon reductions through technology and partnerships. We look forward to seeing you there. In the meantime, stay safe, have a great summer, and goodbye for now. Thank you.